Hey guys, welcome and welcome back. Thank you to all the subscribers for supporting the channel. Today we are talking about knights and castles, but before we do that, I do have a couple books that I want to mention. And so I want to talk about the Pied Piper of Hamelin. So as always, there's things that I forget to mention in other videos. One of them was this, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. It is an old tale, and I will be reading this when we are talking about the plague and rats, because this is a story about rats. So in this story, there is a young boy who is the main character, or one of the main characters, and he lives in this beautiful castle. He lives outside of the castle, actually, with many other children, and the people outside of the castle are quite poor, and then the people inside of the castle are very rich and greedy. He considers them greedy, and they have a problem. They have a problem with rats. Rats are taking over the town, and they really have to get rid of them, and so they don't know what to do. And one day, this Pied Piper, this man with a flute, comes to town, and he says, I can solve all of the town's problems. All you have to do is just pay me 1,000 gold pieces, and I will take care of them for you. And so the mayor of the town, or the king of the town, he says, yes, let's do it. The Pied Piper plays his flute and leads all these rats outside of the town, and everybody's happy. The Pied Piper comes back. He says, okay, I've gotten rid of all the rats. They're all dead. So I'd like my 1,000 pieces of gold now. And the mayor of the town says, no, we're not going to pay you 1,000 pieces. Let's make a deal. I can give you 100 pieces. And the Pied Piper says, well, we agreed to 1,000 pieces of gold. And the mayor says, you're only getting 100. So take it and beat it. And the Pied Piper refuses, and he says, I will come back tomorrow and I'll ask you again. And if you don't give me what we agreed upon, then, something's going to happen. And so he leaves, and he comes back, and he sees the mayor on the street, and he says, oh, okay, I'm back. Have you got the 1,000 gold for me? The mayor says, no, quit bugging me. You're not getting more than 100 pieces of gold. And the Pied Piper says, are you sure? And the mayor says, yes. And so the Pied Piper says, okay, well, I'm going to take something more valuable than any piece of gold. And so he starts to play the flute, and he starts to walk out of the castle. All of the children hear the flute. They become enchanted by the music. They follow the Pied Piper out of the castle, and everybody in the town is crying and yelling for their children to come back, but the children are enchanted and they can't hear anything else. All they can hear is the beautiful music. They follow the Pied Piper to this mountain, and they all go inside this mountain. Well, the little boy at the beginning of the story that I showed you with the crutch, he can't follow behind as quickly as all the other kids. And he's like, I'll make it there. His friend's trying to wait up for him, but he goes, go on ahead, I'll make it. And when he gets to the mountain closes, and all of the children go inside the mountain except for him. And so this is a very old tale, and usually what happens is the kids go in the mountain, they're trapped in the mountain forever, and then the little boy goes back to the castle, tells everyone what happens, and everybody cries. But what I like is that in this story, the Pied Piper does give people a chance to make amends and fix things. So the little boy goes back, tells the villagers what happened, and he said, if we fulfill everything that the Pied Piper sets out, then the children will come back to the village. And basically, the Pied Piper says that the people ruling the castle and even the villagers themselves have been way too greedy. They don't take care of the children, and if they're not going to take care of the children, then he's not going to bring them back. And so the villagers set out to fix everything in the village. The Pied Piper says they have a year and a day to do it, and also he wants his 1,000 pieces of gold. So after a year and a day, the Pied Piper comes back for gold. He brings all the children with him. He's happy that everything has been fixed in the village, and the children can live a happy life there. And he asks the mayor one more time, "Can I have 1,000 pieces of gold?" And the mayor says, "We ran out of money because we made all these improvements so that the kids could come back." And I will leave it there, but it's a very good story. And the story is by Michael Morpurgo, and he is a laureate writer, and you'll see that I have many other books by him. I think that his stories are great. Okay, so castles and knights, let's get into it. We will be talking about some of the more romanticized versions of knights and what they do. And also we're going to talk about a bit of the origins of the knight. But first we're going to talk about castles. So this is DK Eyewitness Castle and Knight. This is an older book, but I think you can still find it around. And inside, just like usual, they have very lovely realistic pictures and illustrations that talk about everything you want to know about life in a castle and about knights. Along with that is this David Macaulay Castle, How It Works. Now, David Macaulay has another popular book that looks like this. It has a cover similar to this, but it is a picture book, and this one is a reader. So that is why I got this from the library, because it's something that my daughter can read. So it has small text. I think it's appropriate for 3rd grade level. I thought it looked nice. And so if you would rather have a reader instead of a picture book, you could try this one out. This one is Castles, Pyramids, and Palaces, and this is actually an Usborne beginner knowledge book. This one does look old, so you probably have to search for this one, but this was in my library. I thought it was excellent. It is by Carolyn Young and Colin King. And I like that you can go through and it talks about just building structures in general and the story of building. So I like that it starts off with that, and then it goes through some of the first buildings, and it does talk about in here forts, hill forts, which I like because that goes along with Celtic history. And so then they talk about pyramids. They also talk about how ancient Greeks built things and the Romans. And as I mentioned, we will talk about the fall of Rome. So I thought this was a really great book for us. And then here they talk about fortress castles. So this is like with Celtic, this one with Celtic history. And then it talks about castles that, you know, when you think of castle, you think of like the medieval English castles. And then it also talks about cathedrals. And then at the end, I love that it has this timeline and it shows you how buildings were made throughout time in a timeline. So I thought it was great. And then if you're looking for something like this, a medieval cathedral, this one is by Fiona MacDonald. I've mentioned her before. I do like Fiona MacDonald's books. And so this one takes a look inside a cathedral. You find lots of cathedrals in Europe. And so if you guys take a trip to Europe one day, it might be nice to read up on the history of cathedrals. I think stained glass is really beautiful. You could do like a stained glass art project with your kids. This does talk about stained glass. This is very much more technical, so I don't know that we would read through this whole thing, but we'd pick out things that interest us. I do wish that I could find a book on gargoyles, so they just have a tiny little section about gargoyles here. That's not something that I looked into too much, but if you have a recommendation on some sort of picture book about gargoyles, please let me know. And then some fun castle books. This is A Castle Full of Cats, and this one is about a queen who loves cats, and the king really doesn't like cats, and she just wants to have a house full or a castle full of cats. And so this is just a little story about the cats being a headache to the king, but in the end the king does turn around and he ends up loving cats. The next book is The Castle in the Attic by Elizabeth Winthrop. So this is a book that I saw recommended online, and it's a novel, and so it's kind of long, but it would be a good read aloud, I think. And so this is about a boy who has a neighbor that he really likes, and his neighbor has to move away. She's like an older lady, but she gives him this castle. He puts it in his attic, and then he realizes that the castle is magical, and so is the knight. And it sounded really interesting, so I just wanted to share it here. Okay, and so now we're talking about knights, and this is Medieval Knights, Knights in Shining Armor by Gail Gibbons. Who doesn't like a good Gail Gibbons book? She always does an excellent job, and this one has more, I'd say juvenile illustrations, but the information's good, and I like how she keeps it short. So this tells you, again, everything you might want to know about a knight and becoming a knight and what that involved, and then what knighthood is today and how knighthood has changed. And the next book is St. George and the Dragon, retold by Margaret Hodges. Now this one did win a Caldecott Medal. Before I go into the book, I did want to say something about St. George and the Dragon. And if you're not familiar, St. George is the patron saint of England. And so we'll get into the book, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about St. George. So this book is your more romanticized version of knights and the stories that you hear about knights. And the illustrations in this book are wonderful. I think the writing was well done also. And it tells a story about St. George, how he goes to defend this queen, this princess comes and she seeks St. George. Her parents' castle is being harassed, threatened by a dragon. So St. George comes to help them, and he sees the dragon and he fights it off, not one time, not two times, but 3 times. And in the end, St. George is victorious, and he ends up marrying the princess. And so, again, good story. So a little bit of history with St. George that I thought was interesting is, even though he is the patron saint of England, he was not British. And so he is a real person, but he was a Turkish man. He was born in Turkey, and he became a Roman soldier. And when he became a Roman soldier, he was put to death, and so then that's how he became St. George. And when the British knights, British soldiers, went on the crusade in the Middle East, they learned about St. George and how he slayed a dragon. They took on that story and brought it back to England, and he became not only a saint for the knights, but later on in history he became the patron saint of England. And so I find it interesting, if you know a little bit about the history of the British Isles, that the Romans came and they occupied Ireland and Britain, and they were seen as the villain. But then later on, the knights and the British monarchy saw St. George, who was a Roman soldier, as a hero and a martyr. And so I just thought that was interesting. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and it wasn't particularly about St. George, but it's just about knights in general and how we come to see like this romanticization of knights. The original knights I would consider them original knights, where the idea of knights came from, is actually from Celtic stories. And so one of these knights is called Finn McCool, and you can find it in this book, The Favorite Medieval Tales by Mary Pope Osborne. There are other stories, just like picture books of Finn McCool. I haven't got them yet. My library has some of them, so I'm going to check it out, and I'll probably share it with you in a short. I don't think I'll do another full-length video, but I will share about it in a short if I find some good ones. Anywho, so Finn McCool, that is the first story. And Finn McCool, I say he was like the original knight, because many tales of Finn McCool, he is fighting giants, or he's fighting serpents or dragons. And dragons in Celtic, Scottish history, and also in the history of cultures in other parts of the world, dragons were originally sea creatures, water monsters. And so this is where the notion of fighting fire-breathing dragons comes from. And so we will be reading Finn McCool and maybe some picture books about Finn McCool. And another knight that I wanted to mention was Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And Sir Gawain is a Celtic story, and it talks about Sir Gawain and how he fights a Green Knight, and also how he fights dragons as well. And this book is by Michael Morpurgo, and I thought it was good from what I read of it. I just read little excerpts of it, but this is definitely a more romanticized knight story. There's a lot of kissing going on in this book, or the princess wants to give him a kiss, or he asks for a kiss. So just pre-read it. Maybe your kids would like it, maybe they wouldn't, maybe you wouldn't find it appropriate, I don't know. But this is what the illustrations look like. And this is a section where, the princess is like, you can't leave without giving me a kiss. And then the knight, Sir Gawain, he says, kiss away. And so, but I think this story overall is pretty good. This is where I think they're talking about how he chases a wild boar all over Britain. And I think it's like an evil boar. And so, this is a very long story just about Sir Gawain, and he is part of Arthurian legend. He's one of King Arthur's knights. So if you're looking for a longer edition, a longer story of Sir Gawain, this might be the one for you. And then if you're looking for a book about a female knight, this one is called The Princess Knight by Cornelia Funk. And this one has, this kind of reminds me of like some of the Usborne illustrations. But this one is about a little girl who's raised by her father, the king, she has 3 brothers. Her mother dies, and the king has to take care of her, but he doesn't know how to take care of a girl, and he just thinks, well, I'll just raise her up the way that I raise my boys. And so he teaches them all to be knights, including his daughter. Her 3 brothers make lots of fun of her, and they're like, there's no way you could be a knight. And so as the story goes on, she grows up. She becomes really good at jousting and riding a horse, unbeknownst to her brothers. And then one day, her father says, we are going to have a tournament, and the winner will become your husband. And she says, well, I don't want to marry whoever wins the tournament. And her father says, nonsense, this is just what we do. And so she starts to cry, and one of her brothers is very sweet, and he says, don't worry, sis, I will win the tournament, and so you don't even have to worry about marrying someone. And she cheers up a bit, and she says, thank you so much. And she's like, but I think I need to take matters into my own hands. And she decides that she will fight in the tournament, and she does. And as you can imagine, she wins the tournament, and then she doesn't have to marry anybody. And she goes off, and then a couple years later, she comes back to the castle. And anyway, it's a good story if you're looking for something like this. This book is the Joan of Arc, and it is by Josephine Poole. And I just love the cover on this. So I was like, the artwork's going to be excellent in here. And the storytelling was also. And so if you don't know about Joan of Arc was a female knight in real life. And so So this story is about her life, and it starts off when she's young, and she starts hearing voices in an orchard one day, and she doesn't tell anybody that she hears these voices, but she thinks that they are heavenly voices. And she grows up to be a teenager. She continues to hear these voices, and she has premonitions that there's going to be a war, and France is going to be in a war, and that she is going to be in this war fighting for the King of France. And so that is what happens. A war breaks out. She goes to the King of France. She says, I've had premonitions, and I'm supposed to be in this war, and I'm going to help you win this war, and I can tell you what's going to happen. And so this part was interesting, because when she goes to the king, she makes a mistake. She thinks she's talking to the king, but it's not the king. And they say, I'm not the king. And so then she has to go and talk to the king. Anyway, King of France believes her that she has received these heavenly messages, and she goes to war. She wins a war for France. But then at the end, it's quite tragic, because Joan of Arc is burned at the stake. And so at the very end of the story, it does show her getting ready to be burned at the stake. And what she's burned at the stake for is heresy. Now, I've heard that she was burned at the stake for heresy. Some people say she was burned at the stake for being a witch. And so, you're going to have to delve deeper into that if you're interested in that. But what happened was that the King of France did her dirty, and he made some agreements, I believe it was with the King of England, and one of the things was, to punish Joan of Arc. And I think there's a lot more to it than just that. Because Joan of Arc was seen by the common people as a hero. Maybe they didn't like the fact that so many people rallied behind her. They wanted to get rid of her. And so, anyway, I thought this was a good story. And I think Josephine Poole does some other books that I have requested from my library. Haven't got them yet, but check that out if you want a beautiful copy of the Joan of Arc with, beautiful illustrations. And then last but not least is Robin of Sherwood, and this one is also by Michael Morpurgo. And so yes, this is about Robin Hood and his merry band of men, and this is a very long story of Robin Hood. And so we will be reading a shorter version of Robin Hood, and we'll also be reading, I believe Robin Hood is in here. It's like a 2-3 page story of Robin Hood, but I wanted to get the longer version of Robin Hood, and this is a beautifully illustrated book. It is, like I mentioned, it is by Michael Morpurgo. You might be wondering, what does Robin Hood have to do with knights? And so even though Robin Hood does not wear, a suit of armor like a traditional knight would, I still consider him a knight, as part of the knights. He is part of the Arthurian legends and the Round Table, and I really like the story of Robin Hood, how he sticks up for the little guy, and he goes out into the woods and he finds people living in the woods, and they band together and they work together. And I think that he encompasses a lot of the characteristics of, the code of knighthood: honesty, chivalry, bravery, kindness. And so that is why I include him in here. And so this story is really good. I have not read the whole thing, but I read the first chapter, and I read the prologue here. And so in this prologue, this young boy, he's in his home, there's a storm coming, and he has a favorite tree outside, and his tree gets blown over in the storm, and he's like, oh no, my tree. And after the storm blows over, he goes to the tree and he looks at the tree, and under the tree he finds a spearhead or an arrowhead, and then he finds a foot bone and a leg bone, and then he finds a skull. And then it goes into the story of Robin Hood, and it goes back to when Robin was a young boy and he's having a nightmare. And it says that Robin Hood had this nightmare ever since he was a child, and his nightmare was that there was a storm and there's this big tree, and he sees a boy, and the boy's going to the tree, and when he gets to the tree, the boy is scared and he sees something under the tree. And then Robin says every time that happens, that's when he wakes up from the nightmare. He doesn't want to see what is in the tree. And Robin Hood thinks that the boy in the dream is him, and that it is foretelling his fate, his death. And so that is where I left off in the story. Like I said, I have only read the first chapter, but I thought the writing was so good. Oh, let me show you some of the illustrations. I like the illustrations. You can tell if you watched the other medieval book list that I've done, I really enjoy like the watercolor type of illustrations. And so that is it for all of the books for the medieval book list. If I have any more books, I will post that on a short. And what is this? Oh no, I think it's a dragon. Ah! And so I'll leave it here, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope that you can incorporate some of these books into your learning. I think medieval times is going to be an awesome year for us, and I hope it is for you too, and I will see you in the next video.